All right, so if you haven't had a chance to finish up your lab assignment, as a reminder, it's not due until next week, so keep refining it, keep working at it. As I mentioned before, a lot of 3D modeling, surprisingly, is muscle memory. It really is. You know, I'm a big basketball fan, and basketball, you know, the NBA basketball season is moments away, right? We're just about to get going here. And my favorite basketball player is LeBron James. Do you think LeBron James, as he's dribbling down the court, is thinking about the mechanics of dribbling and running at the same time? No, not at this level, right? It's all muscle memory at this point, right? It took him a long, long time to get to that point. But now that he's past just getting his body to cooperate, he's thinking about how to be creative on the court. He's thinking about passing the ball, how to get his teammates involved, maybe going up for the epic windmill dunk, you know, all that jazz, right? He's thinking about how to win the game versus how to dribble. You're at that learn how to dribble stage still, okay? And it's going to take some practice and some repetition and some experience to get really, really, really good at the stuff that we're going to be doing. I'm going to move this because thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, let's just jump over to Canvas real fast and explore what we're going to be doing for this week's homework assignment. Finish up the lighthouse. This is a grade book item. It's really going to be helpful, okay, to get that done over the next couple of days, because I want you guys to focus as much energy as you can this week on our first big model, okay? I mentioned at the beginning of the semester that you're going to have a love affair with this train. At the beginning of, I think, our second assignment, we blocked out the basic simple shapes of our train. Well, now we're going to take that block out and we're going to start making some high resolution geometry and make it actually look the way it's supposed to look, okay? So we're kind of taking a gigantic step forward in level of detail. So there's really two ideas that we need to start to explore today so that we can kind of help facilitate the construction of a more complex geometric shape. The first thing that we're going to look at is the role of backdrop images. Back in the coffee cup, the basic train, the backdrop image helped us very quickly establish the overall structure. But now that we're working towards a goal like this, we're going to incorporate some additional backdrop imagery that's going to give us the accuracy that we need. And there's a technique that we have to follow in order to set up all these backdrop images so that they work together as a unit. Okay, so there's a skill here that we're going to be establishing. In addition, we're going to start to explore some more advanced edit tools that will allow us to give us some really great functionality in building complex shapes. Specifically, we're going to talk a lot about slicing a little bit later on today, which will allow us to go in and create shapes like these little bands that go down the fuselage. So just some more edit tools that will help us create some more complex forms in our structure. I'm providing you guys with some really great backdrop imagery. You're going to be making both the train and the coal car. And if you go down into the resources section, here are the train details reference images. Let's just take a look at what that bundle of assets look like. All right, here we go. All right, so this is what's in the folder. Dun, 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 dun. These are the 4 pictures. Okay. As 3D modelers, we want to use as much reference as we can. Ideally, the best reference for our models, blueprint imagery like this. Now, what are these blueprint imagery what is it helping us see on the shape itself?
Like the basic shapes?
Basic shapes, absolutely. So I like that you guys started there. We can very easily see the forms and the structures of the basic simple shapes that create this very complex shape, okay? Now, what else is this image giving us? Of?
The size of, say, let's say the size of the whistle compared to the size of the steam pipe.
Bingo, and that's it, okay? Because now we have some information that helps us establish those spatial relationships to each other, right? We want to make sure that details like, for example, this wheel here is of appropriate size and scale to these little things over there, right? The reference imagery gets us going down that path a lot faster than just looking at it or trying to come up with it in our brain, right? The more we use the backdrop imagery and the more that we use reference during our modeling sequence, the more accurate our models are going to be. And it's also going to get us to that end result a whole lot faster, right? Someone else has already done a lot of the heavy lifting for us. Is this cheating? No, it's not cheating at all, right? This is part of our process. We want to use reference images exactly like this as much as we can to aid us in the modeling sequence, okay? It's the fastest, easiest way to get to that end result. The only cheating in the real world, well, that would be the result of cheating, right? Yeah.
The only way you get punished for cheating in the real world is when you get sued for copyright.
That's right.
Everything else, if it doesn't happen, you're fine. Excepting marketing and whatnot, but
You know, sometimes asking for forgiveness is a whole lot easier than asking for permission. So, I kind of, with a lot of things, it's like, I'm not going to make it a problem until someone else makes it a problem, right? Okay, so I've given you a whole series of them. So, of course, we have our train from the front, our train from the side. Here's the coal car from the front and the coal car from the side, okay? Now, if you look at these images in particular, these are, oops, let me do this. So here we go. Now you can kind of see everything. These are orthographic reference images. They're completely devoid of any perspective. So it makes it very simple to model to. We don't want to use any reference images that have a tremendous amount of perspective in there because our understanding of straight lines is going to be warped, okay? In perspective imagery, all of our straight lines are diagonal lines, okay? As we start to incorporate the illusion of depth in their imagery. These blueprints do us a great service because it strips out all of that perspective warping and just gives us a very straightforward line drawing that we can use as a tracing guide for our shapes over in Modo. However, there is a little bit of a setup sequence that we need to follow, and we're going to go through that here in a second. Before we get started, I want us to, I think it's really important that when you're using these images, that these are a guide. Our goal is to get it as close as we possibly can. Does anyone want to take a guess as to when this image was likely created? Sure. 2002? What makes you think 2002?
What, like upload to Google and stuff?
No, this image was definitely created.
Actually created?
Like actually created, yeah. Sure, let's call it 1890s. Point being, before CAD, right? This was hand-drawn by an artisan, by an engineer, okay? So, in pre-CAD era, well shoot, even in the CAD era, computer-aided design, we have to account for human error within the pictures themselves. Point being, these pictures are going to get us very, very, very close, but they're never going to be exact, okay? They're going to get us to the 5-yard line, okay? And it's our job to take the ball into the end zone, okay? That's why we're artists, okay? We're supposed to use the thing between our ears to get us to that end result. So don't go crazy trying to align these images just absolutely perfect, because you're never, ever, ever going to get them absolutely perfect, okay? We just got to get them as close as we possibly can. Let's jump over into Modo and start looking at how we can use all these backdrop images to start setting up our model in our three-dimensional space. All right, so I'm going to create a new project file here real fast and jump over into the model layout. And first things first, actually, let me close down some of these other project files just so they're not monkeying up my system here. Now, does anyone remember where we need to go inside the Modo interface to import a backdrop image, or to create a backdrop image, excuse me? It's not a mesh, unfortunately. Yeah, so a backdrop image is an item. It's a container for an image that's going to be placed inside of our three-dimensional scene. So we got to go into the Add Item pull-down menu, and there it is, backdrop item, the little Mona Lisa thing. With that item selected, check it out downstairs in the Properties panel. We'll have an image well that will allow us to import in one of the images. I think just for brevity's sake, I'm just going to import the singular image for my locomotive. Let's load in an image, go find where I saved it all, and here is Baldwin Class 56 front, okay? And it gets placed at the origin of the scene. Now, if you go back in time a couple weeks ago when we were talking about the construction of the basic train and its friend, the coffee cup, there were some ideas, a practice that we went through to put these backdrop images inside of our three-dimensional scene. What's the next step after we import the image into a backdrop item? Yeah, so we want to make sure that's right, absolutely. So we want to make sure that this backdrop item, and I'm just going to name it real fast. So I always put ref on mine because this is reference, and this is the train This is the front. Okay. And down here, under the projection type, we need to make sure that we match the contents of the picture with a particular view inside of our three-dimensional scene. Now, if we look at the picture is usually the best guide as to what we need to change this value to. What are we looking at here? This is the front of the train. So I want to make sure that the projection type is set to front. Now, it does two things for us. It makes sure that it's oriented in the view, but it also filters and determines which orthographic view inside of our three-dimensional scene that this image is going to show up on. When we were working with our previous assignments, not a big deal. But now that we're working with more than one backdrop item, this now becomes a critical modeling aid for us, because I only want to see this image when I'm looking at my scene from the front. So if I change my 3D view from perspective over to front, check it out, I still see the train. Haha, that's what I want. However, when I change my 3D view from the front to, like, let's say one of the side views, I don't want to see that image. Okay? I only want to see the image of this side of the train. So that projection type down here at the bottom, this es muy importante, as they say. Okay? Got to get that set pretty early on, like step number 2. Now, let's get the other one in. Add item, backdrop item. Let's give it a good name. This is ref train side. I don't know if it's the left side or the right side, and really I don't care. Okay. With that selected, let's load in just like we did the other one. Here's the side image. Okay. Ta-da! Okay, so once we have it in, what's the next step? Yeah, the projection type, which is automatically going to rotate and orient it to our three-dimensional scene. Let's choose right. And let's look at our scene from the right. In Pop Quiz Hotshots, is my train facing the correct orientation in our three-dimensional scene? Why? What's towards the Z? You got it. So this is the front of the train, the cow pusher, the cattle guard. Okay, poor cows. It really is. That's really what it is. It's a cow. It's a cattle guard, and it's supposed to push something off the railroad tracks like a cow. Poor cows. What a horrible way to go. Anyways, so the front of the train is now facing the front of the scene. The compass down here is going to tell you the positive direction of each of our 3 axes. The front, in finger quotes, is positive Z. So this is facing the positive side of our Z axis. So we're good to go. Okay? It's facing the right way. Now, if it's facing the wrong way, what easy, simple solution can we employ to get it flipped around? Yeah, just hit it flip. Just that easy. Just flippity flip, flippity flip. Okay, I'll put it back. All right. Okay, so step number 1, we got everything in. Step number 2 is align them to their perspective or to their correct orientation. There it is in the front. Here it is from the side. Things are good to go. If I look at it in a perspective view, we can kind of see the intersection of all this stuff happening in here. Now, step number 3 is aligning each one of these backdrop images to the grid. Okay? Let's look at my train from the front and start to decode and understand maybe a good placement for all of this imagery inside of our three-dimensional scene. Now, we want to be good modelers, right? So it's an important phase, an important step for us to ensure that our imagery is centered at the grid itself, okay? And placed in an area on the grid that makes sense, okay? If you look very, very carefully at this image, the author of this image gave us a fantastic aid in helping us understand the placement of this picture inside of our three-dimensional space. Has anyone picked up on it? In the actual picture itself?
Yes.
What is the helper?
There's very few little lines, like right there where the 100's at, there's a line going up.
Yeah.
And then, you know, on the side, where the 100's at, down by the front there's a line going across.
You got it.
So that's the X and Y axis.
You got it. Or it defines some center lines for us.
Yeah,
center lines for the actual shape itself. Now, I want to pay really close attention to this vertical center line that kind of splits our train in half. I need to adjust that image left and right inside the frame itself. Let me show you why I need to do that. If that line represents the middle of the train, let's examine the location of that line in reference to the location of the center line of our grid. Okay? What can you tell me? It's off a little bit. It's off just a little bit. Okay, we need to move it around. These pictures very rarely are centered in the actual picture itself. The drawing is very rarely centered in the picture. So we need to make sure that our drawing is centered to the grid. Does that make sense? Yep. Now, there's a couple things that will help. First and foremost, I always change the transparency value of my backdrop images to like 70%. Okay? That way I can kind of see through the image to the grid behind it. That's a big, big helper. Okay? I really recommend doing that, especially when we start throwing down some geometry here in a second. So with my backdrop imagery, backdrop item selected, I can fire off the move tool. And let's just move this along the x-axis here until I'm a happy camper. And somewhere right around there, that's good enough for government work. We'll call that one done. Okay? Huh?
The fact that that's a phrase scares me.
Better believe it. We sent a man to the moon built by a contractor who was the lowest bidder. I love it, right? So this is looking pretty good left and right, but we also want to be smart modelers, okay? Orienting these images, or excuse me, placing these images on our three-dimensional grids is important, but we also need to consider how we're going to be practicing our modeling sequence, okay? Like, I think it'd be a really cool idea to have the bottom, so here's the bottom of the wheels. Maybe that's sitting on the middle of the y-axis, kind of like on the ground, okay? That would be cool. That might make my understanding of all of the spatial relationships a whole lot easier. Whoops. Something like that. All right, that's pretty good. I'm liking that. I'm gonna need to do the exact same thing on the other image. So let's do it one more time. I'm going to change the transparency of this backdrop item to 70% so I can see the image. And now I'm just going to get it close. There really isn't any sort of alignment that we need to do forward and back along the z-axis, but at the very least, bringing it up so the wheels are above the middle of the y-axis is a good helper, right? We're trying to make it easy for us to, to navigate between these two viewports to align and position all of this data very quickly and very accurately. All right, so this is what we got so far. Step number one, importing the backdrop items into the scene. Step number two, orienting, which is a fancy word for rotating all of the backdrop images so that they're pointing and facing the correct way inside of our three-dimensional scene. Step number three is getting them all aligned to the grid. Now, step number four, this is the tricky part that takes some energy. Step number four in this entire sequence is aligning the images to each other, okay? Because this is the big picture idea here. I want to be able to go into the front view of my three-dimensional scene. And, let's do these little boilers down here, right? I want to be able to go into an empty mesh item and say, okay, that's where I want the boiler to be, okay? Or whatever this thing is going to be, okay? And then go over here to my perspective view and continue modeling it out this way. Now, I just happen to get really, really lucky, but we need to be exact. We need to really understand that both of these backdrop items are aligned to each other, that the height of all the features of the drawings are in the exact same location in a three-dimensional space. So here's the next step, and it goes pretty fast. I'm going to start with the front. We only have 2 on this particular assignment, so it's going to go pretty quick. Next week, I'm going to give you 3, and we're going to follow the exact same sequence, okay? So what we need to establish here is some reference points, some features of the drawings that we can see in both the front image and the side image. So look real carefully here for a second. What feature of the picture can you easily see in both the front image and the side image? Okay, the bottom of the wheels. I like that. And right now, the bottom of the wheels is, you can see it here. Yep. If we go over to the right view, can we also see the bottom of the wheels-ish? Looks like the drawing gets cut off down here at the bottom. So that may not be the best reference point for us to align things to. Okay, what else? Smokestack, I like it. So the top of the smokestack. We can easily see the top of the smokestack in both pictures, right? Here it is over there in the front view. I can also see it very clearly in the side view. So that's a good reference point. So here's what we need to do. We need to create some markers, some physical pieces of, yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, how are you switching so easily again?
Yeah, so to get this little pie menu, it's Control Spacebar.
Control space.
Control Spacebar gets the little pie menu. It allows you to flip between all the different camera views or all the different views of your three-dimensional scene.
Also the numpad.
Say again?
Also the numpad does that as well.
Yeah, the numpad doesn't do as many as you'd think. 1, 2, 3, 0 maximizes and minimizes your scene. 4, 5, and 6, you change the different shading models inside of your scene. Yeah.
If you do like 1 or 2 twice, it switches between the two.
Yeah, it goes front to back, front to back, front to back. But yeah, see the top and bottom. All right, let's get back to work here. All right, so what we need to do is that we need to start laying down some physical pieces of geometry that will give us kind of a target, if you will, as to where all of these things are going to be positioned inside of our three-dimensional scene. To do that, we have to have one view that turns into the master view. Okay, master in finger quotes. The master view, in my opinion, is locked down. We don't touch it, right? We align all the other images to the master. If one is locked down, we can align the other two easily. If we're changing all three of them at the exact same time, we're going to get in this infinite edit loop, and it's never going to work. There has to be one common denominator between all the different backdrop items in your scene. For me, you know, it's always the front view, and I don't know why it's always the front view. I think it just is for me. Pick one. Okay, I always pick the front. So this looks pretty good. I'm just going to do a good double check here. Yeah, I'm real happy with the location of this backdrop image in reference to my three-dimensional scene. So let's throw down some geometry on an empty mesh item. Now, what I'm basically establishing here is a location. I've specifically drawn the cube so that bottom edge is at the top of the smokestack, okay? That's going to be my measuring stick. I now have a three-dimensional marker, if you will, of the location of the smokestack in the front view, okay? Now let's go over to the right view, and I'm going to extrude it out a little bit here, just so we have a three-dimensional shape. And I'm darn near lucky. Look at that, because now that bottom edge in the side view is at the exact same location. So I'm pretty close. I'm pretty close. I was on, you know, I couldn't have planned that even better, right? But if I was off vertically inside of our three-dimensional space, what would I need to have done? Just moved up the image a little bit. Moved up the image to the top of the smokestack like this, okay? Because sometimes you'll have to move it around. Top of the smokestack is bloop, right there, right where it needs to go. Now, with a shape like this, we need to understand if we're capturing the depth correctly. And I always give it a good test. Let's get rid of that reference plane. Now, you know what we could do? Let's do this. Yeah, go ahead.
So is it easier to make it as a cube and then do the leveling up?
That's easy too. Yep, that's fine. 6 to 1, half a dozen to another. You get the exact same result. Now, I always like to test this to really make sure that both of these images are working together as a team. Okay? Because remember the big idea behind this. The whole point is that I want to be able to lay down some geometry from one side and then switch a view, and continue modeling it from the other view to model it in 3 dimensions, because we're only getting 2 dimensions from one of these orthographic views. So here's what I'm going to do real fast as a test. I'm just going to create a simple little cylinder. Excuse me. There we go. Let's center this along the x-axis, so it's right there in the middle. And now I'm going to position this kind of over here. Scale it down so that the circle roughly matches the diameter of this smokestack. And when I mean rough, I mean roughly matches. Something like that. That's good. Now let's bevel it up. Shift, click, I'm just going to do a fast one here. I'm not going to get through all of this. There we go. And okay, me being me, I'm going to actually do it because I can't not do it. It is. I hate being me sometimes. There, that's good enough. Okay, so there's the smokestack. Now from this view, that's looking pretty spot on, right? It's looking pretty good. I'm happy with that. Great job, Pat. Well done. Okay, but let's test it. Okay, I'm not modeling something here that I'm expecting to keep. I'm modeling something that I'm using as a guide to make sure that both of these backdrop items are where they need to be. So let's look at my scene from the front, and I'm pretty happy. Okay, because that piece is in the exact same place in location or in reference to the backdrop image in both views. That means that both of these images now are working together and as a team to help me create my model. Okay. Now, another thing that I like to do when I'm working with backdrop images, because check it out, my geometry here is completely blocking the image inside of my scene. I don't like that. Boo, right? As we start to layer in more detail, you know, those new pieces of geometry are going to get in the way. So check it out. There's a great viewport property that I really encourage you guys to turn on. Okay, it's called overlay drawing. If you hit the O key inside of your viewport, you'll bring open your viewport properties. And under the drawing and control section, there's two things that we need to toggle. First and foremost, overlay drawing right up here at the top. Wink. And then we got the exact same property, which changes it just a little bit differently down here at the bottom, overlay. So there's two things that we have to enable. And with both of those turned on, yeah, check it out. Now I can see both my geometry and the image at the exact same time. Okay? The computer is now overlaying the backdrop item on top of the geometry inside of our three-dimensional scene. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's what
Simple little viewport property. It happens all at the property level. So hit the O key to bring open your viewport properties. It's under the drawing and control section. And overlay drawings right there. There's one down here at the bottom too, under the background imagery section. That's what we're after. Okay. Turn both of them on. Yep, you got it. Yep. Turn both of them on. That's what you're going to get, or something that looks very similar to that. Okay. So this is starting to work really well. I'm going to leave that little smokestack there just to talk real fast about a problem that we're going to have inside of our OpenGL viewport. Now we have some geometry sitting down there kind of towards the origin of our scene. And we also have these two lovely backdrop items, right? Which are giving us a nice kind of line drawing of what this train is eventually going to look like. Awesome. I love that. Okay. However, in this view, I just want to see my train. Okay. I don't want to see all those backdrop items. You really don't want to model to the backdrop items in perspective. It's most accurate to model to the backdrop items in the orthographic views, right? So when you're looking at your scene from the side, from the front, you know, this is where it's the most accurate because we can very clearly understand the placement of this detail in relationship to the drawing. So in perspective view, I just want to see the model, okay, and get a good understanding of how it's looking. So if you go back over to your backdrop items, there's a property here that they just added in that's actually really cool. I appreciate this property. And it's show in perspective down there in your backdrop item properties. With that off, we're not going to see that backdrop item in the perspective view. Okay, see how I've turned both of them off over here? Just my smokestack. We didn't delete them. We're just not seeing, or they're just not visible in this view. If I change my scene to the front, there's my backdrop item. If I change my scene to the right, there's my backdrop item. They're still live, they're still there, but we're just not seeing them in the perspective view. Okay? Some people really like turning this off. I'm in that camp. I don't want to see my backdrop items in perspective. I want to see what I've created in perspective so I can really understand if the model is working from all three views. Okay? Another alternative, if you don't want to do that, because some people like having them on, and that's fine. Here's the old school way. I want to, at the very least, push them away from the origin. Okay? If you push these backdrop items away from the origin, what you'll see in the center is just the model, which is the focal point of this entire thing, right? However, we got to be careful because we don't want to push them away and then mess up all the alignment that we just did, right? So we got to be careful. Here's the trick. Let's start from the front. So I'm going to start with the front backdrop item. If I look at my scene from the front, luckily, the compass does a really great job of telling me which axis I can push and manipulate this backdrop item along without having to worry about messing it up. The easy way of getting to that conclusion is to see which axis is not represented in this view. So which of our 3 axes is not in this viewport? Z. You got it. So I'm allowed to manipulate that item along the Z axis, and I won't have any influence on what I've just aligned. Okay? So here's what I'm going to do. This is the old school way of doing it. Just move that backdrop item along the Z axis. Okay? So I usually push them back pretty far. And if you look at the front view of our scene, yep, it's in the exact same place still in relationship to that smokestack. So we didn't mess anything up. We just changed its location along the Z axis. Let's do it one more time from the side. Our compass is always our guide. Which axis is not represented in our compass? X. So for the side image, we're free to move this image along the X axis and not having to worry about it getting messed up. So here it is, along the X axis, which is red. Okay. Now we've kind of cleared out the origin for just the model and just our geometry, but those images are still inside of the scene. Look at it from the side, everything still looks good. Look at it from the front, everything still looks good. Now I'm ready to model. Okay. So this is the sequence that we're going to use. Step number 1 is import in all the backdrop items. Step number 2 is orient the backdrop items. Make sure that the features of the drawing are facing the correct way in our 3-dimensional scene. Step number 3 is align the backdrop items to the actual grids themselves. Then step number 4 is to align all the backdrop items to each other. Okay? That way they're working together as a team. We want their heights to be in the same relative position inside of our 3-dimensional space. Make sense? Yeah, I think this is the critical step. If you don't do this step, you're building your house on sand. Okay? And it's going to wash away in the first big wave. Okay? This is like, have you guys ever painted a room or painted something like in your house? Yeah, what's the part that everyone hates when it comes to painting? All of it. Kim's like, no, I hate painting. It's not the painting or the cleanup. It's the prep work. Yeah, it's the prep work, right? Masking out all the windows, taping out, the door handles. Did you guys know you're supposed to sand your walls before you paint them? Yeah. There you go, right? Most folks, and I'm in this as well, when you're painting a room, like you go to Home Depot, you buy your bucket of paint, right? You come back, what's the first thing you want to do? You want to put the paint on the walls, right? But now you have to work 2 or 3 hours in prepping all the walls. You don't even get to the fun part that day, right? It's like the next day is when the fun part is, okay? But we have the exact same problem here in 3D. Everyone wants to skip this stage because this is not the fun stuff, right? This is the prep work that's crucial. That's going to make your paint job look fantastic. If you do this correctly, your modeling is going to go a whole lot faster, and it's going to be wicked accurate.
Is this a slice part?
No, this is the prep. Yeah, this is the prep part. Okay, so don't forget the prep part. Don't just jump in and start throwing down some polygons. That's mistake numero 1. Okay? All right. Questions on this sequence? All right, so let me get rid. I'll keep my smokestack. It's pretty cool. Let's finish it up a little bit here. Done. All right, that's a good looking smokestack.
What is the percentages of details that you write down?
Yeah. If you can see it in the picture, try to make it. Okay? Try to put as much detail in there as you possibly can. All right. There's a lot in here, okay? But it's actually going to go a whole lot faster than you think. Try to get them in, right? The more detail that you create, the faster it's going to be for our audience to believe that this is a real thing. Okay? All right. I'm going to make the fuselage real quick because it's going to give us a great opportunity and a cool playground to very quickly go in and start talking about some of our new editing tools, our slicing tools. And then I'm going to make like the little, I don't know, the cabin part of the train real fast, which will allow us to talk about some other slicing tools. So let's just do it real fast. What basic simple shape is the fuselage, kind of the boiler area of our train? It's a cylinder, right? So we know which tool to fire off and which tool to use. I'm going to jump over into the front view. Let's see, my signs is at 24. I want to put my segments at 1. Okay? And let's start fleshing this out. Now, when I'm doing this, often I don't care so much about putting it accurately on creation, because I can always go in after I create my circle and center it along the x-axis, right? Let the computer do the heavy lifting for us. Now that we know that it's centered perfectly along the x-axis, let's just scale this thing down. Somewhere right around in there. Good with that? Yep. Happy camper. Let's look at, before I drop the tool, let's move it to the back here a little bit and start beveling it forward. Now, if you look if you look carefully, the reference tells us that there's these stair steps going down to the front. How can we create that? So instead, and you're absolutely right, the bevel tool. The bevel tool is our super constructor. It allows us to very quickly go in and put a tremendous amount of detail into our scene itself. So check it out. I got that front polygon selected, and from the side, I can very easily see the profile that I'm trying to create. So I'm going to use the bevel tool. I'm going to inset it in. And this is where I kind of have to use my tool properties over here to give me a really solid understanding of where it is that I'm trying to take it. Maybe right around in there. I can see the top vert right there, and that's pretty close. Shift click to reapply the tool. I'll pull it out. Then I'll also give it a little bit of an inset to create that angle. Shift click. Give it a little bit of an inset because now the stair step goes down a little bit. Shift click. Start pulling it out. And this one will do an inset as well. And then I'm just going to march my way down towards the center there. But we can create a tremendous amount of detail with just one tool, which is pretty cool. Okay? So the bevel tool is going to continue to be an edit tool that we're going to keep going back to over and over and over again. As a reminder, it's one tool that behaves differently depending on which component selection set you're working in. I just did some beveling with some polygons, and I was able to begin to flush out all of these forms. However, if I was to change my selection state over into edges, okay, as an example, I can select that edge loop on the exterior of my mesh, run the bevel tool, the exact same keyboard shortcut, the exact same everything, but now when I left click and drag, I can start to change the radius between those forms. Increasing the round level will increase the quality of the radius that I'm constructing, so the more curvy it's going to be. So one tool is going to change its behavior based off of what we have selected. So keep that in mind. Remember that. Go back to the coffee cup. I know it's been a couple weeks since we've done some modeling. Time to get our feedback into this thing. So the bevel tool, it's going to be a tremendous amount of fun. Now, as 3D modelers, we want to continue to walk through our practice, right? I think there's a very defined value of blocking out simple shapes as I have, and then going in and editing the interior of those simple shapes with our edit tools. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. If you look very carefully, we have these big metal bands that go around the circumference of our boiler. Okay? I want to have that geometrically. I want to establish that shape geometrically. So I need some edges in here to start to pull and bevel all that information out. Whenever there's a change in plane, we have to define that change in plane with an edge. Okay? Think of them kind of like boundaries of where the polygons are going to be facing inside the scene itself. So I need some additional edges on the interior of my boiler so I can start creating all of these bands. Okay? Now, there are a couple really great tools inside of Modo that will allow us to very, very quickly go in and start blocking all of this stuff out. The first one that I want to go to is called Loop Slice. And I think you're going to find that you're going to be using Loop Slice all the time. I think it was last week or maybe even the week before, we spent some time talking about the properties of a loop. What's a loop? Loop-de-loop? Yeah, a loop. You got it? In the context of 3D modeling, we have two different loop types. What are they? Kinda. Yep. I know where you're going. Polygons and edges, right? We have two different flavors of loop: polys and edges. Okay. A loop is defined as this. It's a row. Okay, a row of polygons that's connected. That's connected to each other. Wraps all the way around the model, back onto itself. See how that row goes all the way around the model? And then eventually, those polygons are going to connect back to where it started. That's a loop. Okay? It goes all the way around the mesh. All the way around the mesh. They come in multiple flavors. Those are poly loops. We got the exact same thing here in edges. There's an edge. There's an edge. Goes all the way around the model until it connects back on to itself. Okay? We want to slice within the loop. Okay? And the computer's going to do this for us. We need to help it out, though, and tell the computer which loop to slice, because there's actually a whole series of loops on the mesh, right? So we need to give it some love. We need to tell it, this is the loop, this is the row that I want you to create a new edge within. So in Modo, we have to select 2 or more polygons within the loop. Now this is a polygonal selection only. So if you're following along, grab a couple polygons, like I have, to define the loop. Now you don't have to do this, but this is a good double check to make sure you've selected or that the computer is about to select the appropriate loop. I've grabbed that polygon and its neighbor there. A great way to see if you're working on the loop that you want to work on is to hit the L key, which is automatically going to select the contents of our loop. Okay? Great way to double check. You don't have to select it, but you do need to select 2 or more polygons on that loop. Now with 2 or more polygons on that loop selected, we can go over into our Mesh Edit collection of tools. Check it out, Mesh Edit. A lot of different slicing tools in here. Okay? Here's Loop Slice. Loop Slice is going to be a tool you use all the time because we often just want to go in and put a new edge right smack dab somewhere in the row of geometry that we've just selected. So let's fire off the tool by clicking on it. And you can see that the interface of the tool starts to activate. Now before we go crazy, there are some tool settings that we need to be aware of. I'm sure that you're starting to understand that Modo has a sticky kind of settings system. Okay? So it's always going to remember the settings from the previous operation of this tool. Important when you go over into the design lab, right? Because if you have someone, you could be following an advanced motor user that changed all of these settings, and the next time that you activate the tool, those advanced settings are still going to be on, right? So I want to show you the ones in here that are really important and that people change the most. Okay. Count. This is how many new edges or how many new edge loops are going to be sliced into the mesh itself. In this version of Modo, we get a really wonderful purple outline that defines the location of these new edge loops and how many. So it's really obvious. In previous versions, it was just kind of a darker orange. I love that they've gone to purple because it's really easy to see now. Okay? So the count determines how many new edges are going to get sliced into the loop. Okay? I'm at 6 now. Let's put that back. Let's put that back to 2. The other thing that we have to define is the mode, which is a rule. It basically determines how these edges are going to get sliced into the mesh. When it's on free, I get to determine the location of each one of these edge loops, these 2 purple guys. Now the system that allows us to do it is this little bar in the upper left-hand corner. These triangles represent the location of these new edge loops in relationship to the total width of the selected loop. Okay? You can left-click and drag on these little arrows and interactively change the location of your new edge loops. Okay? So that's cool. So when the mode is on free, you get to determine where all this stuff goes. If you're only slicing in one loop, just simply left-clicking and dragging anywhere in the viewport will allow you to interactively change the location of that loop. So that's pretty helpful. Okay? I usually keep it at 1 when I'm doing free slicing, because then I can do it real quickly. I can slice it and then position it pretty fast. Okay? I'm not having to go up and mess with all of this jazz up here. All right. I'm going to put the count to 5. Okay? There they all are. And of course, I can go in and start playing with them like this. It's pretty rad. If we change the mode to uniform, watch what happens. I want to zoom out so you can see it. But when we change the mode to uniform, the computer is going to analyze the total width of that loop, and it's going to evenly slice that row with 5 new edges. Okay? So it's going to uniformly or evenly space out all these new edge loops, which is pretty cool. In this mode, I can't determine this distance. The computer's doing it for me, okay? Which is pretty rad. I like that feature a lot, okay? I wish all 3D modeling apps had that feature, and believe me, they don't all have that. So uniform is just going to space them out evenly across your geometry. The last mode can best be visualized by returning the count down to 2 and changing the mode to symmetry. Now I got 2 in here, and if I left-click and drag, you can see that it's going to symmetrically place those 2 new edge loops along the loop. Okay? So now the distance between them here, okay, is the same as the distance over there. Okay? It's symmetrically placing them along the row. So we have some options in here with loop slice and how we're going to be throwing down this new geometry. Now once we drop the tool by tapping on the space bar, all of those tool options are gone, okay? If I wanted to change the location of these loops now, how would I have to do it? By moving it, right? So now we just run the move tool, and I can move that edge wherever I want to go, okay? All right, let's look at my mesh, and I'm going to place those 2 new loops kind of where I want that change to happen. Somewhere right around in there. That's pretty good. Let's do it one more time. How many polygons? I want to slice this area of my mesh. Okay. How many polygons on the row do I need to select in order for loop slice to do its business? 2 or more. You got it. 2 or more. And you have to slice it along the loop that you want to slice. I want to slice it that way. Okay. So I've just grabbed, 6 of them here. And I'll run the loop slice command. Whoop, there we go. I'll leave it at 2. Shoot, I can just, I could put the mode to free if I wanted to, but I'll just do this. Just grab them and move them where I want them to go. And life is happy. Good 3D modelers are like chess players, okay? We need to think 8 or 9 steps ahead. Do I want the thickness of each one of these bands to be the same? Makes sense, right? That's probably a good place to go. That each one of these bands be about the exact same thickness. I'm going to eventually just select that row and bevel them out. Well, if I did all 3 of them at the exact same time, all 3 are going to share the exact same bevel properties, so they're going to be the exact same width. I like that, right? So let me finish my job here real fast and slice this one more time. I could have just used a mode of free, but I'm going to do it this way just because it's faster. All right, there we go, and that's pretty close. Let's look at my mesh. Aha! Awesome. I think you can start to see the value of having all of the backdrop items off in the perspective view, right? Because as I'm jumping around from view to view, I absolutely need to use the details of the image in this view to help me establish the location of all this, right? Of all of these edges. Gives me super accuracy, which is what I'm after. However, when I go into perspective, I just want to see the mesh, okay? Does anyone remember the keyboard shortcut to automatically select the loop? You could do that, but I just want to select the loop. I have 2 or more polygons selected on multiple loops. the L key. Okay, L selects the loop. Okay. You could use the up arrow. That's a great way of doing it. A little bit more manual, right? There's nothing to.
I didn't know that. That's what it
Yeah, the L key is going to allow you to select the loop. Okay. And with those polygons selected, now I can just hit the B key to activate bevel and just give it a little bit of a shift to create those bands. And all three of them are the exact same width, which is pretty cool. The loop slice tool is going to be a tool that we go to often, so get comfortable using it. Start applying that tool as you start to edit your mesh inside of your train. I think you're going to find that it's pretty helpful. Okay. All right. Before we walk away from our slicing tools, let's go and make this little house over here in the back. So this is where it gets kind of fun. Right about there somewhere. I'm not going to do all of this crazy detailing on the front. Okay. Let's give it a little bit of thickness here by extruding it out. And now I'm going to center this before I go any further. Okay. Yeah, got to save it. Now check this action out. I want to start establishing the width, right? Now from the right side, yeah, I'm doing a great job of establishing the dimensions of that back kind of like cabin piece. I don't even know what this is called, like the house where the train engineers hang out, right? So it's looking pretty good from this view, but from the front, yeah, I really haven't established the width that I'm looking for here, okay? Now you're more than welcome to go in and select individual faces and move it like that, but now we've created an asymmetrical piece, okay? We should always try to work in symmetry as often as we can. So with the entire shape selected, just running the scale tool will allow me to push this out where I need it to go and maintain my symmetry. All right. So that's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with this. Now I'm a big believer in painting with a broad brush stroke, establishing the overall dimensions of a lot of these pieces first, and then going in with our edit and our slicing tools and getting the really fine level of detail that we're looking for. Okay. So I've painted with a broad brushstroke. I'm happy with the overall shape of my cabin, but now I need to go in and start slicing up so that I can see, maybe the windows a little bit. That might be kind of cool. Make some openings in there for a lot of these pieces. And I probably should try to make it more of a U shape than a square, right? Because this is something that a train engineer is going to need to go in. That's an important idea, right? So before we start getting the windows in there, let's continue painting with a broad brushstroke. The biggest mistake that 3D modelers make is they put detail in too early. Try to keep it basic construction level for as long as you can. It gives you the most flexibility and the most opportunity, if you will, to make changes. Because you're going to make a lot of changes to this as your own understanding of the model kind of becomes a little bit more clear. So here's what I'm thinking. If this is the overall shape that I'm trying to establish, how big are the walls? What's the thickness of the outside walls in relationship to the fuselage? It's a good question, a question that maybe we should look to answer. Okay? Let's go ahead and start figuring those spatial dimensions out. Now, ideally, yeah, all four walls, excuse me, should be the same size, right? And I wish I had a whiteboard that I could draw on, but I'm looking at my train from the top. There's the smokestack, okay? So there's 4 walls that we need to establish. This left wall, this front wall down here, of course the right, and the back wall. I want all 4 of those walls to be the same, to be the exact same size. There's some consistency throughout the mesh, but I don't really know how big or how small I want them to be yet, so I need to have some sort of edit system that allows me to explore. Check this action out. I'm going to do the top and the bottom at the exact same time. And watch what happens when I run the bevel command. The bevel command starts to shrink when I do an inset. It starts to shrink. Now don't pay so much attention about the selected polygon in the center, but the outsides, what's it starting to look like? So this row in here, what is this? What could this possibly represent? The walls, right? And since we're using that bevel command, the thickness of each one of our walls is the same. Okay, I like that. The bevel tool is our grand construction tool. It's our helper. It's designed to make our lives go a whole lot easier, right? So I'm just going to explore this. I'm going to have to guess. I don't have any reference from the top, so I'm going to have to do my best. And I'm pretty happy with this. I'm just going to imagine that this is what I want it to be, and then I'm going to drop the tool. Okay. So that's going to be the thickness of my walls. Do I need these interior squares anymore? No. So let's select both of them and hit delete. Now, we're kind of generating a small little problem here. We have a hole in our mesh. Okay? Now check it out. This is an important part of computer graphics. I can easily see kind of inside the hole that I've created. I know very directly that there is a polygon on the outside, that guy right there. But as I look into the hole, seemingly that polygon disappears, right? It's magic. It's not magic, okay? In computer graphics, we have something that's called the surface normal. It's basically a fancy idea for the direction that this specific polygon is facing inside of our three-dimensional scene, okay? If you really wanted to see the direction of your surface normal, check it out. You can turn it on. It's a viewport property. Kind of turns into visual noise, but you can enable it. So buyer beware. Hit the O key. It's under the visibility section, and there it is. Show selection normals. Okay? If we turn it on and select that polygon, see that gigantic dotted line that's coming out of the center of the surface? That's the normal. That's the defined direction inside of the scene that this surface is facing. In Modo, if that surface normal is facing away from our perspective of the scene, the shape is going to go invisible, okay? Because that polygon that I had selected just a second ago is facing away for us. So it's just going to go invisible. That's just kind of part of our thing, okay? So watch this. Watch this very directly, okay? We need to create some interior geometry to finish the job here, to start making what looks to be like walls, okay? Point being, just because we have a polygon on the outside doesn't mean we're going to see it all the time. So we need to ensure that we have geometry on the inside of the cabin that finishes out the illusion, okay? So how are we going to make the walls? Well, I want to introduce you to a really great tool called Bridge. And Bridge allows us to make some meaningful connections between existing geometry, and that's the important word. The geometry already has to be in the scene itself. Check it out. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab that edge and its neighbor downstairs. Okay? So those are the two edges that I've created. The Bridge command is going to create a polygon in between those two edges for us. Okay? Check it out. You can find the Bridge command inside the basic tool section. It's right there. Shows up in a couple different places in the Modo interface, but they've brought it to the basic section. So if we run Bridge, and here's what's tricky. We got to physically click. Okay? And now it created some new geometry in between those two selected edges. Oh, pretty cool, huh? I'm going to go back in time. We can make this go a whole lot faster if we select everything. Watch what happens when I hit Bridge now. Bloop. Now we have a hole. Okay? And now we have something that we can begin to work with. Okay? Defined walls that have an inside and an outside, right? We created the outside of our geometry with that block, but thanks to the Bevel tool and the Bridge command, we're starting to very quickly create the inside geometry. Okay? All right, things are looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with what we've created here. I've painted with a broad brushstroke long enough. It's time to go in and start slicing in some details to create like the windows and what have you. Okay? So let's do it real fast. I'm going to look at my scene from the right and start understanding how in the world I'm going to put all this stuff together. Okay? Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go back in time a couple steps. Hit undo. Okay. So you can do it one at a time, like this. So that one's going to get connected to that one. The Bridge command is way over here. Then click. Okay? You just work your way around the mesh if you'd like. That's totally fine, by the way. Bloop. Gotta be careful of what you're selecting, and it works. That works just great. Or I'm gonna hit undo. There we go. If you have the top loop selected and then hold down the shift key, and double click on that bottom loop, you can do all 4 sides at the exact same time. Yeah, it's pretty cool. All right, let's drop the tool and start flushing out where we want those windows to go. Now, I got extraordinarily lucky. Sometimes luck will beat skill and cunning every single time. Okay, I got lucky. I selected all the edges for my shapes, and you can just barely see the dimensions of my inside wall, and that I got close. Okay, because I want to be able to slice in a window, and I don't want it to interfere with the wall. So that shows me that I'm pretty close to what the dimensions of the wall need to be. All right. So the loop slice tool does a great job of slicing our geometry, but it's not the only slice tool that I would recommend that you use, because I want to be able to have the windows on this side, kind of the back side of the mesh, be in the exact same location as the windows on the front side of the mesh. Loop slice, you know, we could make it work, but the chances of it working exactly the way we want quickly is pretty small. Okay? And it gives us another great opportunity to look at a great tool just called slice. Okay? Now, the easiest way for me to kind of communicate what slice does, it's like a laser, man. It's just like a laser beam. And it's got wherever that path goes, it's going to slice your geometry. It's going to add edges. But luckily for us, it's a very controllable laser if we use our orthographic views. Okay? I'm going to go over to my right view, and I want to double click on my walls so that I only influence that part of my mesh. Okay? I don't want to mess up all of my fuselage, all of this stuff over here. I just want to focus my energy on this guy. Okay? All right. So slice is really cool. You can find the slice command. It's also in your basic tools right there. If you go into Mesh Edit, it's the first one on the list, slice. It's an oldie but a goodie. It's been around for a long time. It's a laser, and it's going to slice our geometry along the laser's path. Now, to physically create the laser's path inside the scene, you need to left-click and drag. You see that little purple line? That's the laser beam. Whatever touches that laser beam is going to get sliced. Right now, that laser beam is above my geometry, so it's not doing anything to my scene. Okay? So I'm going to grab this little blue cube. Oops, I'm zoomed in, so it's like wigging out. Yeah. It's kind of hard to see. You probably will be able to see it really easily on your screen. Can you guys even see that on the projector? A little bit, yeah. You can just barely see that wherever that purple line touches my mesh, it's slicing it along that angle, okay? And it's going to slice through everything. Anything that's selected is going to get edited, so we've got to be careful with this, okay? So I want to use the slice tool to very quickly slice in some edge segments for our windows, okay? I'm going to go back in time. I don't want a diagonal line. Yeah, that's not good. See how it sliced through everything? It is literally a laser, man. Let's do that again. Look at my scene from the right. This time, however, I want it to slice perfectly vertical. You can do perfectly vertical or perfectly horizontal by holding down the control key before. See how I'm doing it? It's snapping to perfectly vertical. If you're holding down the control key before you click on the mesh, you'll get a really nice vertical slice. There's one. If I drop the tool and look at what's happened, yeah, check it out. That line and that line, or those two edge loops were just added, and they're in the exact same space because it's slicing through like a laser beam across all the geometry and the polygons in my scene. All right, let's do it a couple more times. Fire off the slice key, or the slice command. What key do I need to hold down to constrain it to a perfectly vertical slice? Control. So I'm going to hold down the control key and then left click and drag. Now, in order for our slice to work correctly, we need to be good stewards of our scene. And remember that the laser beam is only going to focus and work between the blue cubes. Okay? Notice the location of this blue cube in reference to my geometry. It's kind of, it doesn't go all the way through. Remember that. Doesn't go all the way through. Let me drop the tool and see its product. Uh-oh. What did it do? Yeah, it didn't go all the way through the mesh, okay? So wherever that line is what's going to be sliced. We want our geometry to be sliced along a loop. So we can't have verts just hanging out in the middle of a polygon like that. This is bad form and extraordinarily bad practice, okay? I'll make my verts bigger so you guys can see them. Can you guys see it now? See how that vert is just hanging in the middle? That's bad practice. We can't have that, okay? This creates an n-gon and a mesh that's fundamentally broken, okay? So luckily for us, the solution is that we just have to be mindful of where that purple bar is. I'm going to hit undo. There it goes. Let's do it again. So when I run this slice command, hold down the control, fire it down, things are on our way. And it goes pretty fast. It goes pretty fast. I'm going to be careful over here. I'm going to fudge it just a little bit. There we go. Happy? Yep. Voila. Now I've sliced in all of the edges that are needed to start coming in and getting the windows. Okay? So there's all the vertical ones. I'm going to do the exact same thing horizontally. Run the slice, hold control, drag out a line to slice through my mesh, and now I can establish the tops of my window. Do it one more time, Shift C. Here's, let's just say that's the bottom of my window right there. Or actually, I guess I'm doing the trim, so I probably should be a little bit more accurate. There we go. There we go. Shift C. That's good enough for me. Okay. Check it out. Now, these polygons in here are in the exact same location as all of those guys because I sliced them all at the exact same time. My freaking laser, man. I love my laser. I wish I had an actual laser in real life. It'd be great. Like burn things. I would do real life 3D modeling. It's called.
Also known as sculpting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I do a lot of kit models, little plastic styrene models. I still do that a lot often at home. All right, so we've sliced in the geometry for our windows, but we actually haven't created the opening for our windows yet. So we still have some work in here that we need to do. And there's a couple things that will, a couple functions, if you will, that we now have the power to do, okay? So let's go back to our reference because I've done an okay job here of establishing the window frames. If you look very, very carefully, see how there's a little wood frame that goes around our window? And then here's the actual glass here in the center. Well, I can create all of that thanks to the Bevel command. Let's check it out real fast. It's pretty easy. So I'm going to grab my windows, and I'm going to do both sides at the exact same time. Okay. Yep, just doing a good double check. Now I'm going to run the Bevel command and start pushing the mat a little bit. There we go. Looking great. With those polygons still active, I'm going to do an inset now and start to create the illusion of the wood frame itself. Now reference is going to tell me how far I need to go. Maybe right around in there. These windows are more rectangular, and that's okay because we can go back in and fix these just by running like maybe the scale tool that way. And then I'm going to individually by hand go and move those bottoms up so they match reference. Because the trim is wider on the bottom than it is at the top. Somewhere right around in there. So now I have those polygons that define the actual windows themselves. And I can begin to bevel those in. Other way. Ta-da! Cool, huh? Now, what's fun about this is that if you really think about it, if we really wanted to make an opening, we'll have to figure out some way to slice that back polygon to match the dimensions of that outside shape. Okay. Now there's a couple ways that we can do this. Maybe we can do them all at the same time. Just going to run Bevel. Oops, not Shift, sorry. Inset. Let's see. That's pretty close. I could make them more accurate if I wanted to. let's turn into a tremendous amount of work, like a tremendous amount of work, okay? A lot of fine tuning in here. Maybe the faster way of going about doing this, okay, I'm going to hit undo a couple levels here. Maybe the faster way of going through this, okay, is starting, oops, I'm sorry. I'm going to grab both of these windows and move them back so I have something to trace to. Same with these guys over here. There we go. So now from the inside of the train, I can very easily see where my window needs to be, because I need to have on these polygons in here, I need to have some geometry that I can now delete and create an opening, okay? Which brings us to another tool called edge slice, okay? So you get loop slice, which is going to slice around a row. The slice command is going to be a freaking laser, man. It's going to slice our geometry wherever that purple line is. But edge slice is a little bit different. Edge slice is going to allow us, as the user, to customize the location of all of these new edge slices on the interior of an existing piece of geometry. Check it out. It's really easy to use. Edge slice is right here. The keyboard shortcut is C. C is in Charlie. And now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go in and place a dot there. And see how I'm slicing on the inside of a model? Now, there are ways of getting this super accurate, but for today, and I'm running out of time here, this will do. And then I'm going to finish it by going back up here to the top. Oops. There we go. And now I've outlined that window with the edge slice command. Now, if we take a step back and look at what I've created here, this is an n-gon, and I want to try to resolve that n-gon as much as I can. I'm going to hide that stuff just so it's out of the way. Luckily for us, the edge slice command allows us very quickly to go in and slice from corner to corner. Okay? Let me do that one more time. I'm going to grab the edge slice command. I like starting on an existing edge. See how it gives me a nice little highlight? Click. The yellow dot represents the location of the starting point for my slice. Drag it over to the corner, and then you're just kind of connecting the dots. Connecting the corners from the corners. That's all we're doing, just get this little diagonal line in here, which will resolve the n-gon pretty quickly. Something like that. Now, what this gives us the ability to do, let's put that back over here. What that does, it allows us to make an opening between those two polygons. Remember, whenever we want to change the plane or change the shape of something, we need to define that plane change with an edge, right? I've gone through great pains over the last couple minutes creating some edges on the interior of that n-gon so that I can go in and start making a plane change, a change in form, okay? We're going to use bridge. Because bridge, you know, if you remember, the bridge tool allowed us to make the walls of our house pretty quickly. Okay, same idea here. I can make the opening. There's the opening. I just deleted those polygons, by the way. If I grab these guys and their neighbors on the outside of the mesh, which are that one, that one, that one, and that one. Let's run bridge, which you can find under the basic section. There we go. Now we actually have geometry for the inside of a window.
Hey, Pat,
Yeah.
so what was the issue with when you go all the way back to when you just finish doing your bevels before you did all the edge slicing and doing this step, pushing it inside? Why couldn't you just deleted that section that you ended the bevel on?
Why could I have deleted that section that I ended the bevel on?
If you have enough undos, I might be able to kind of like
Okay, let's see what we got.
That's
an interesting question. Let's explore it. Okay, right there.
Actually, a little bit more. Right there.
Okay, yeah,
What happens when you delete that polygon?
you have a hole.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have any interior geometry that defines the thickness of the window frame itself. It's just a hole in the mesh, right? You can actually see down into the mesh, right? Into the
And you can't do a bridge from. Oh, okay.
yeah, because we need something to bridge to, right? That's why I was slicing up this polygon in here to give me something to bridge to.
Got it.
Yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense.
edge to edge, edge to edge. Okay. Good question. Yeah, no, let's do next week.
That's why I asked. Because
Okay, so those are the basics of the slice tool. There's one more thing that I want to show you that will help, because if you look at the reference, there's some fun shapes in here that we're going to have for potentially a challenge in creating, like these little pipes. Use the curve tool. Walk me through it, Randall. Yeah, these little pipes here, these little elbow angles. Yeah, and I think I know what you're talking about. So you're talking about like the tube tool, this one? Yeah, this is an okay place to begin. You're going to find that the tube tool, well, yeah, it will give us some geometry, and I'm putting it in the center. The tube tool, yes, it will give me geometry, right? But it's kind of hard to wrangle, okay? I want a little bit more accuracy. I want to be able to control it a little bit more directly. So let me show you an idea here that's pretty rad, and it kind of goes back to bridging things. Now, I can see from my reference, well, not exactly the way I would like them to, because it looks like the front plate is blocking some of those tubes, so I'm going to have to guess. And you can guess, it's okay to guess, okay? So there's a circle. It's a little bit too big, so I'll make it smaller. Made it too small. I'm basically trying to figure out the total diameter of that tube down there, okay? All right, that's it. Let's just call that's what it is, right? It needs to be a whole lot closer to the fuselage of my mesh, and let's extrude it out to make it into a three-dimensional shape, okay? So that's my tube. I can see from my reference here that I'm going to need a couple of these. It's going to go up, and it's going to go back. So I'm going to be a smart 3D modeler first. I have a basic shape here whose pattern I know I'm going to have to repeat over and over and over again, so I'm going to continue to, before I start making the curves, let's duplicate a couple copies, okay? That way I always have one that's perfectly horizontal, chilling in my scene. So I always like to keep one, just in case I need to come back and use it again. Now this guy is going to go over here. I'm just going to shove him into the house of my model. Grab that topmost polygon and move it back to where I want it to go. Now I need one more. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees so that we have something to connect it to. I'm going to place that polygon right there, kind of at the end of the curve, and this one right there. All right, so now I have this cool little piping system here that we're going to start working on. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yep, look at some reference. Yeah. So now that I've started to lay out the general kind of feeling of my piping, I want to start making some connections between these and these, okay? This little elbow joint here. Bridge is such a wonderful tool, okay? Because bridge, as a reminder, allows us to make connections between existing geometry, okay? Check this section out. Bridge is pretty freaking rad. I can grab that polygon and its neighbor down here and activate bridge. Now, if you just left-click in the scene, you're going to get a result that's, well, not really kind of what we want, okay? It's just a linear connection between those two edge loops, and while that's cool, it doesn't really give me the level of detail that I'm looking for. It doesn't give me that nice elbow joint between those two pipes. Before I drop the tool, I can change some of the settings in here to give me something a little bit more attractive, okay? Specifically, if we increase the segments, watch what happens to that connection. Okay? Say again? Don't go crazy with it. I'm at 4, and that's probably as far as I'd go. Yeah, the more segments that you add in there, the higher the quality is going to be. Maybe. Okay, let's do it one more time, because I got the exact same problem down here. I want to make a connection, an elbow joint between those two pipes. With those two polygons selected, I can run bridge. Bloop. And we're on our way. It's a good way to begin. It's not a perfect elbow joint. If you look carefully, we're not getting a true 90-degree bend in here. That's okay. That's okay. No one, only us mega nerds that are actually looking at the geometry are going to notice that, right? I have to remind myself from time to time that no one's going to see the difference between like an 89-degree bend and a 90-degree bend. You know, only people like me.
Is there any way to take a cylinder that has some tight segments and do that bend in a way that doesn't mess up the meshes like everything?
Yeah, absolutely. This isn't necessarily something I was going to talk about today, but if you want to check it out, it's really cool. The question was, can we just like bend a cylinder? Yeah, absolutely. We're going to need, here, let's use my friend down here. Okay. Now what we need, and I'm going to bevel this out a little bit. Okay. Shift click to do another bevel. Okay. So this small section in here is going to be the bend, or the area that we're going to bend the pipe along. Now I need to have a lot of geometry in here to give me more edge loops to facilitate the construction of the mesh. So I'm going to loop slice this entire row, and I'll put, I don't know, maybe like 5 in here, uniformly spaced like that. So this is the part that's going to be the elbow joint. I'm going to select everything above it. I don't want to touch this. This isn't what's going to get bent. This is going to be where the bend is, and then I want all of this stuff to stay straight. Okay, oops. All right. There's a great tool called, under the Deform collection, called Bend. Okay? Yeah, Bend is great. You left click on the mesh. Where the big circle is defines the beginning of the bend. Where the cube is where the end of the bend is going to be. So anything after the cube is going to be untouched, uninfluenced. And then the big blue circle allows me to bend the shape like a straw. So that's a way of doing it. Requires a little bit more setup. In certain situations, the bridge way is just a quick way of making a connection. This is a great way of doing it too. When you get to GCOM 410, I'll talk to you how we can do it with paths. We can take a circle, sweep it along a path. It's pretty rad. It's good stuff. All right. So let's just go back over and look at the assignment sheet on Canvas here real fast and talk about what your expectations are for this assignment. Now, you're going to try to add as much detail in here as you can, okay? If you can see it in the reference image, you should be able to make a model of it. Paint with a broad brushstroke. Don't do bolts immediately, right? Try to get a representation of all the literal moving parts first, like all these arms in here. Don't worry about the connection points, but we start laying the foundation for all those parts and pieces. Start using your bevel tools to start creating the spokes on the wheels. If you can see it in the reference, try to make some geometry for it, okay? Push yourself. Try to go as far as your skill can take you. Remember, you're here to learn how to be a 3D modeler. This is going to take some work, okay? This is going to be a 6 or a 7 hour project, okay? Yeah, it is. You were yawning. Bad time for a yawn, but that's okay. Yeah, maybe a little bit of both. I'm happy with Cries of Terror. Okay, so if you look at the reference here, this reference image does an excellent job of what it is that we're trying to define. You can easily see all the basic moving parts and pieces inside the train. Get the arms in there. Get these things in here. These are basic, simple shapes with a lot of beveling involved, okay? You can go pretty far on this with just this one image.
Can you go back over the wiggle cuts on the fuselage?
No, I can't because we're out of time, but go watch the live stream.
Do we have to color it and all that?
Yes. So at the end of this project, put simple materials and textures on everything. One final thing about the geometry, make a little scene for your object to live in. If you go back to the basic train, what did we add to give it a little bit more character and create a little scene? Tracks and the railroad ties. That goes a long way. Give it a function. It's not just a train floating in a gray environment. It's a train who's sitting on some basic railroad tracks in a blue environment. I don't know. are there closed captions on my live streams? I believe YouTube goes back and captions it after the fact. I believe so. Yeah, the auto captions. They're not great, but it's the best I can do. Yep.
What is your YouTube channel again?
So my YouTube channel is just my name, Pat Crandley. Yep. Alrighty, folks. Good luck. May the force be with you. Don't forget about your lab, and I'll see you guys next week.
Ley or Ly?
Ley.